Welcome to a video titled Traveling Through Git History, actually Traversing Through Git History. My name's Dan, and I'm going to walk you through some of the basics of going through Git repository history. So let's get started. If you watched some of the previous videos, you may be aware of this repo called Trick that I cloned from GitHub. And if you don't have it and you want to follow along, you can clone it real quick by doing a git clone on this address. So before I get started, I just want to comment on one thing I haven't talked about yet, which is how Git works. And I'm only going to sort of scratch the surface here, but since we're talking about history, I just want to comment on where all the history is stored in Git repos. And the answer is that all the history of everything that happens in your repo over all time is stored at the top level under a folder called .git. So it's a hidden folder. If you do a long listing, so like, for example, if you do an ls, it's not going to show up. But if you do an ls, the long listing, you will see it, along with other Git files like the git ignore, which I talked about in a previous video as well. So if you actually look under this folder, you'll see a bunch of files and folders and stuff. And really, you should never ever have to touch this stuff ever. But this is where Git goes in this .git folder when you ask Git to do things. Whether that's to make a commit, it's writing in this folder. It's if you want to check out old history, it's reading it from this folder. And basically all the data is under here, not as files, but as compressed objects, and Git knows how to extract them when they're needed. So for now, just know that the entire history of everything in your repo is stored under the .git folder, and all repos must have this folder. So one thing I want to go over here is going back in time. So I haven't done that yet. And if you look at Git Log, this shows you all the commits that have been made in the repo. And you can actually do Git Log on particular files to see which commits touch those files. So, for example, if I do Git Log on this file, these are all the commits that touched this file. And so we can see that there's quite a few here. And if we just sort of pick one, say this guy, and we copy this commit SHA-1 off because we're about to use it. And before I do anything, I just want to show you that Git Status shows we are on branch master. We made a commit in a previous video that we never pushed. That's why it's saying we're ahead by one commit. And there's nothing to commit. The working directory is clean. So what we're about to do is we're about to go back in time to this commit by John Penn on Tuesday, June 30th, and check out the repo. So all you got to do is git checkout. I don't have the middle mouse on here, so I have to use paste, and hit enter. And Git tells you, note, checking out to the SHA-1 we requested, And it warns you, it says you're in a detached head state. You can look around, make experimental changes, commit them. You can discard commits you make in the state without impacting any branches or performing another checkout. So it gives you a hint here, and it says if you want to create a new branch here, which you should do if you're going to make commits at this location, you can do so now with this command. So it's just sort of a helpful hint. So what might not be clear if you're new to Git is that when we did this command, we checked out the entire working tree, which means that all the files that exist in this repo are now at the state they were at this SHA-1. So if we want to poke around and look at the file that we were curious about in this example, you just look at it here. And now you can see the version of this file as it was for John Penn's commit on June 30th. So let's say we, for some reason, want to make a change to this file. Just going to add a comment, write the file, and quit out. So now if we do Git Status, it says we're still on this detached head. This is the same status message as up here. This was just sort of, if we had done a Git Status up here, we would have seen the same thing. Probably should have done that. But anyway, what we see is the one modification that we made. And this is kind of a weird use case because you don't typically go back in history and then tweak something. But there are cases where you would want to, like if you find an error and you want to track something down. But I'm doing this for demonstration purposes because I'm going to show you something that's an implication of how these things are checked out. So now let's go back to the master branch, and that is where we were before we did all of this. So we do git checkout master. This is what I wanted to show you. This is Git saying it can't check out to master. It says your local changes to the following file would be overwritten by the checkout. So that's the file we modified. And it's saying please commit your changes or stash them before you can switch branches. And all this is saying is Git is telling you, hey, I can't check out, I can't change the working tree if you have modifications here, because if I do that, it will discard your modifications. So Git plays it on the safe side, thinking, hey, you probably want to do something with this. So it aborts the checkout. And there's ways to force it, but in general, this is a nice to have because it's telling you, hey, I found something. Are you sure you don't want to keep this? So I just wanted to point that out, is when you switch between branches or you check out the old history, you really want to make sure that you're on a clean state, meaning you don't see anything in the modified area. Because if there happens to be a change to that file in the checkout, it's going to error out. So in this case, let's just say we want to discard the change. And just git check out the file. And git checkout is kind of confusing because it does a number of things. In this case, we're saying, hey, I want to discard the changes in the working directory. And this is where I basically got this from. This double dash is optional in this case, but this will discard the changes in the working directory. You can also, you also use git checkout, like we did earlier, to change the entire working tree to this detached head state. You can also use git checkout to create a new branch. So this is one of the most confusing things about Git, is that especially the checkout and branch commands aren't necessarily intuitive, because checkout does a number of things depending on the context and the context of the state of the repo itself. So in this case, we'll go over that a little bit more today and in subsequent videos. But in this case, we're just going to discard these changes, do a git checkout, git status. So now we're on the same commit we were on, but we got rid of this modification. So now we're free to check out back to master. And Git won't complain. It says the previous head was this commit we were on, and this is the summary of what that commit was. And then we just switched to branch master here, and we're back to where we started before, right at the beginning of this video. The branch is ahead of origin master by 1 commit. So it checked out the entire working tree to what it was at the beginning of this video, and we're back where we started. So the next thing I want to show you is, what if you didn't want to change the whole working tree? What if you just wanted to check out that one file? I can show you how to do that, and it's the exact it's the same checkout command, which is, like I said, a little bit confusing to new users. And so the syntax for that is you give it the commit that you want to check out the file from as the first argument, and then a double dash as a separator. And basically it says, when you put a double dash, you say everything after this is a file. And this is how Git can be verbose in distinguishing between commit, SHA-1s, and file names, because in theory you could have a file name that's called this, and so it's just a way of being explicit and telling Git, I want to check out this file from this commit. And you'll notice here too, I haven't gone over this yet, Git understands if you don't give it the full 40 characters, it will search for the commit, and as long as this is unique, it will go ahead and assume that you want that full 40 characters SHA-1. So we're going to do this. And now, if I do git status, what I see, this is a little bit confusing. What happened was we told Git to check out this file. Now, in this particular case, this is sort of an assumed behavior. Git went ahead and added this to the index. Because it assumed, I don't know if I agree with this, and maybe there's more going on here, and there's a way to sort of specify that you don't want to assume this. But basically, Git has assumed you checked out an old version of this file, and you may want to commit that. So it has put it in the index here. And so if I look at the file now, middle mouse here to make this easier. This is the file from Back in Time on the 20th by John Penn, which is different than what the current branch knows it to be, which is why it shows up in the index at all. Now, I'm going to go over in more detail how the index works and how to manipulate things in a different video. But for now, just know we want to take this out of the index. Let's say we got this file from the history, but we don't really want to commit it. We just kind of want to look at it. So what I'm going to do is execute the command it recommends to unstage it. And it tells you unstage unstage the file. Now, just to be clear, this didn't change the file at all. This simply said, hey, these modifications, I don't think I want to commit this. But it didn't change the file. So if you look at Git Status now, you see the exact same change, but it's not staged for commit. So I'm going to go over this next command in more detail in subsequent videos, but now if you do what's called a git diff, let's say you want to know how this file is different from the master branch's version of it, you just type git diff and the file name, and it spits out a unified diff of the lines that have changed, which is pretty cool. So I want to show you another way to sort of look at changes in history in the Git log. So let's go ahead and discard this change, just like we did before. This change being the old version of this file compared to what the branch thinks it should be. And we do Git Status, and we see we're back to where we were. So the commit that we extracted this from, let's go back in history and just grab it. So this is it right here. If we want to do a Git log starting at a commit of choice in the history, we just simply pass it the commit. And then that'll be at the top. Instead of have to scroll through the history to find it again, it'll start there. So this is that commit. Oops. By John Penn on the 20th. So what I wanted to show you is if you want to see a summary of what changed in a commit, all you got to do is pass --stat to the git log command. And what you'll get is a super awesome summary of what changed in this commit. And just the files and how many lines were changed, basically. And so we'll see the one we care about is right here. And so this is sort of an at-a-glance view, like if you want to look at, oh, hey, what all changed in this commit besides that file? Well, this is how you would do that. So you can also do a command called git show on the commit. And what this does, much like the git diff we showed before, it will show for all the files that have changed, what are basically the unified diffs for all those files. And it shows them sort of all in a row. And so you can see that here's calling out what the diff looks like for this particular file. And so it'll go through all the files and show all the changes, and so we got to the end here. And so that's a way to see, you know, if you want to know exactly what changed line to line in a commit, you can do git show on that commit hash. And so I think that's probably a good place to stop. The basics of traversing the history is simply using the git checkout command. And you pass it the SHA-1 you want. You can pass it the branch name that you want, and I'm going to talk more about branching in later videos. But git checkout is basically your method for traversing the history, and a good way to sort of go back in time chronologically is to just look at the git log and start paging through. If you wanted to go back to a date in June, and I'll just keep looking until you see, you know, a commit that happened in June. So I hope you found this helpful. My name's Dan, and I'll see you next time.